Hey everybody, it's time to talk about protecting your annuals from cold temperatures. We are here in northern Michigan and we can get really cold temperatures right until the end of May. So it's important that if you're taking home some annuals that you're thinking about how you're going to protect them from that cold weather. Now, different plants are at different risks because some of the plants are a little more cold tolerant. So I did create a little chart, and on the chart I have kind of the most cold tolerant down at the bottom to the least cold tolerant up at the top. And what I use to create that list is the plant's hold temperature. Now, hold temperature is not a surefire way to know if a plant's going to be able to survive the cold or not, but a hold temperature is basically the lowest temperature that a plant can safely be kept at for an extended period of time without hurting it. And usually when a plant is close to its hold temperature, it doesn't grow very much. It grows really, really slow, but it definitely doesn't get damaged by the temperature. Generally, plants can go 5, even 10, sometimes a little bit more degrees lower than their hold temperature for a short period of time, and there won't be any kind of problems. So using the hold temperature is just kind of a way to estimate what temperature they're safe at. Now, the plants that are at the highest risk are going to be usually like your tropicals, like your caladiums, your cannas. Those do not like cold at all. So those you want to get indoors first or have them in the most protected area possible, because if you don't do that, they are going to suffer. And a lot of these, either it's going to kill them or it's going to kind of send them into a dormant stage, and it's going to take a really long time for them to kind of wake up from that. So that's important. Other ones that are at risk, like your coleus, you don't want your coleus facing the cold regularly. They just don't like it. Their leaves can kind of get a little translucent and unhappy and wilt and die off, and it just makes for a less attractive plant. Begonias aren't real keen on the cold as well. Salvia generally survive the cold, but these annual salvias, they can really get nipped if they have new growth and then it gets cold. So even though we have perennial salvias here, they're usually not leafed out when it's this cold yet. So don't kind of mistake that these salvias are the same as our perennials, because we wouldn't have leaves on our perennials necessarily as well. So anyway, let me move on. The ways to protect these plants. So if you are working with a plant and you've got it outside and you don't have the option to bring it in, because bringing it in really is the best option. So whether you keep it on a wagon, you pull it into the garage, or pull it into a safer, warmer spot every day, that's going to keep it safe. Or if you got a deep freeze coming, then you might bring it into the house, you might bring it into the bathroom, somewhere where you can kind of keep it safe. That's going to be the best way. But if you can't do that, covering them is going to be your main option. So that might mean putting them under a tree. That'll kind of get you a couple degrees, or you can put them under some kind of canopy if you have like a porch or something like that, or close to the house. That tends to protect them a little bit more, but the lower the temperature gets, the higher the risk. So covering them with, say, a sheet is one of the best ways to do that. So if you just have a sheet, you don't need wool blankets or anything like that. In fact, something heavy is going to risk breaking your plants, and it could do more damage than it's going to actually help. So a sheet's a really good option. Newspaper or some kind of paper, if you had kind of painter's paper that rolls of it, or meat packing paper or something like that, you can put that over it, and that should hold the temperatures in. They work as good insulators. Plastic, usually that's a last resort, simply because plastic isn't a very good insulator, and sometimes when the sun comes out, if you don't get it off right away, it can cause the leaves to stick to it or to kind of burn a little bit. It kind of causes a little bit of problem. So it's a last resort. Now, some plants can get right down to freezing and they're going to be fine. So petunias, calibrachoas, even geraniums, although they tend to like it a little bit warmer, can do just fine. And then there's also some plants that actually recover from an actual frost or almost a freeze. And I should define frost versus freeze. Now, frost can happen anywhere from, like 28 degrees up to 36 degrees. And frost can do damage to the leaves of your plants. So frost doesn't always kill them, but it can. Like a coleus, a lot of times if it gets hit with frost, it often doesn't recover. But frost can happen all the way to 36 degrees. So anytime we're getting into those mid 30s, your plants are at risk. Meanwhile, a freeze warning is basically it's going to freeze. But there is the deep freeze, and deep freeze is any temperature under 28, and very few of your annuals could make it past 28 degrees without some kind of protection. So keep that in mind. So keep an eye on the temperature, cover them when possible, bring them in if possible. One of the disadvantages to keeping your plants inside, so some people will say, well, I just keep it by a sunny window. A lot of these plants do prefer a lot of sun, more than you get from just a sunny window, because that's actually more of a part sun situation. If you do keep them inside, because you do have maybe quite a bit of sunlight, you're going to want to make sure that you have maybe a fan on them or good air circulation, because otherwise you can run into problems with some mildew or some kind of issues like that. You're going to want to keep an eye out for bugs as well, because when it's warm and they're wet, that can be a bit of an issue. And if we don't have a lot of sun, we don't have a lot of air circulation, these plants can also get oversaturated. So you have to watch with your watering, especially if you have, say, geraniums or calibrachoas, even the dahlias and some of the salvias. They're going to prefer to dry out and then get wet again. So be sure to do a little research on whatever plants you have inside. There's only a couple plants that like to always be moist. Otherwise, a lot of them like a little bit of a dry out or getting close to dry. So you can always stick your finger in there and check. Anything that's dry could use water, but anything that's not dry doesn't necessarily need to be watered right away. So it's important that you keep track of that and you're watching the water, because it's very easy when you're keeping a plant inside the house to overwater it, not have the air circulation, end up with either bugs or mildew or issues that are going to damage the plant. So it's not ideal keeping it inside the house, but sometimes that's the only option you have, especially if you want to shop now when the selection is the best. Of course, waiting until May, letting us taking care of it, and you coming in June, the only thing is that some plants are going to be picked over at that point. So it's kind of a catch-22. But I wanted to give you guys these tips so that if you are taking plants home, you are paying very close attention to the temperature and you know some ways of keeping these plants safe. So I do not want you to have to take them home, kill them, and have to come back again. I'd rather you did it right away and got to use the plants that you bought and really got to enjoy them. So I hope this helps. Good luck, everybody. We've only got a couple more weeks of this kind of weather, and then everything's going to be nice and warm, and summer will be here, and hopefully we'll get lots of sunshine and great weather. So fingers crossed. Talk to you all very soon.